Welcome to Coach Bennett's podcast, where every run has a purpose, where kindness is hardcore, where this is about running, and this is not about running, where every starting line is a finish line in disguise, where rambling still gets you where you need to be, where pineapple will never ruin your pizza, and the sodas, adult and not adult kind, are always cold, and where there is room on the starting line for everybody. I'm Coach Bennett. Thank you for letting me be a part of your day. Let's get started. Welcome to episode 32 of Coach Bennett's podcast, How to Get Over Bad Runs and Bad Races. At least I think that's what I'm calling this episode. I do know, though, that's what this episode is about. How to get over bad runs and bad races. Because I'll tell you what, it is right up there with the most often asked questions that I get. How do you get over them? How do you deal with them? How do you work through them? How do you move on to that next starting line and hopefully leave that last bad run or bad race behind you? Well, that's what we're going to talk about. We also have some updates and some other things that are going on with Coach Bennett's newsletter and podcast and all that other stuff. We got a mindset minute and we're opening up the mailbag. So let's get started. All right, we are back for episode 32 of Coach Bennett's podcast. Let me start here by thanking everyone for making episode 31, Play Running, the most popular first week for a podcast I've had so far. That's right, episode 31, Play Running, was the most listened to episode so far of Coach Bennett's podcast. And that makes me so happy because of the topic, play running. I'll tell you what, if you can play running more, you're going to play running more, which means you're going to run more. And if you can run more and have more fun running, then you're going to run better. And isn't that what we're trying to do? Yeah, I think so. And then when you realize that you can define better, that better could mean faster, it could mean further, it could mean more consistently, but it could also mean having more joy while you run, dealing with stress more positively while you run, being a better teammate to yourself or others while you run. It means that there's an endless supply of reasons to go for a run, which then means there's an endless supply of excuses to go for a run. And like I said, that makes me happy because I think the world's a better place when we all go running. So there you go. Thank you again for making episode 31 a hit. I appreciate it. I mean, it starts with the athletes. It doesn't start with me. It starts with you. I mean, technically, I guess it starts with me because I got to record the podcast. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you listen to it. You subscribe to the podcast. You're sharing the podcast. So thank you, thank you, thank you, and thank you. So, all right, here we are, episode 32. Now, before I get into this topic, let me just go over a couple of things real quick. Perfect storm in a good way of a number of things. There was a Coach Bennett's newsletter that came out, Kindness is Hardcore, which if you haven't read yet, please do. So that recently went out, and that on its first day was the most read newsletter so far since I've been putting out Coach Bennett's newsletter. So that struck a chord too, and just like Play Running, Kindness is Hardcore means a lot to me because I think that is the foundation of great coaching, whether it's self-coaching or coaching others. And I appreciate so many of you reading that and sharing it. So I'll put the link to that in the show notes as well. Last week also, there was just kind of a random end of a run little reel. It was like 25 seconds long that I put up on Instagram after I finished running. And that was the most watched reel on my Instagram in a really, really long time, especially one that wasn't partnered with Nike Running. And that resonated really strongly. And it was really just about the fact that actually I went a little bit too hard on the run. And I said, sometimes you go a little bit too hard. And that's okay, because sometimes you're going to go a little bit too slow. You're going to go a little bit too short. You're going to go a little bit too long. And it's okay. Because if you're just going a little bit something, you're going a little bit forward. So that also resonated with a lot of you. So I'm really positive right now at the start of 2024 with what's hitting and what's landing. It makes me feel really, really good about kind of the state of this community that we've got, that we're building, that we're expanding. and that we're constantly inviting more people into. So once again, thank you to everyone. I'll put the link to the reel as well in the show notes. And as you heard in the intro to the episode, the mailbag is back, and the Mindful Minute with Coach Tammie of the Show Up Society is back. So we got a lot going on, and we've got the show to do. We've got the episode to do. We've got the heart and the soul of this to dive into right now, which is how to get over a bad run or bad race. And the reason why I'm doing this now is because, well, you've been asking for it, and you've just broken me. I finally relented and said, okay, I'll do it. Because you ask all the time. And that's a really good thing to start this with, because it's important for everyone that's listening to understand everyone has this question. And the reason why everyone has this question is because everyone has a bad run or a bad race at some point. You're not alone. There are a whole bunch of things that make us feel very alone. And oddly enough, they're the things that usually are the things that are not unique to us. Having a bad race, look, if you run and you race, you are going to come across a number of bad races. That's just the way it is. If you run, you're going to have bad runs. That's just part of the game. It's part of the gig. It's part of the show. And yet, when we have these things, I think we can put like this spotlight on ourselves and think something's wrong with us, or we're weak, or we're not good, or we screw up all the time, and we feel distant, removed from everyone else. And we shouldn't. We should not at all. Because if you have people around you that have tried to do anything well, if they've attempted to better themselves in any way, then they understand what you're going through. It doesn't matter if you're a championship puzzle maker, or you do crossword puzzles, or you knit, or you're a teacher, or you're an actor, or you play Alai. Remember Alai? That's like, if you remember the old Miami Vice. Now I'm dating myself incredibly here. But at the beginning of Miami Vice, they would have this real quick kind of scene of some people playing Alai. And that was the first time I'd ever seen it. I'm like, what is this? And they have these really weird kind of J-shaped implements that they put on their arms to throw the ball, or I don't even know what it's called. Anyway, the point is, if you play Alai, and I think that's how you pronounce it, you're going to have some bad Alai games. Now, let me tell you this right now. In no way did I think at any point when I was going to talk about how to get over, deal with, and respond to bad runs and bad races that I was going to be talking about Alai. I just, but sometimes you just ride the wave where the wave takes you. And it took me to Alai, and now we're talking about Alai, but we're not going to be talking about Alai anymore, because we're going to start talking about the actual subject, and Alai is just the segue that takes me to be honest. Because if you are a Alai player and you have a bad game, but you're honest, you're going to admit, you know what? There will be bad games. I'm just not going to play great every single time I play. It's the same thing with a run or a race. Not every run is going to be fantastic. Not every race is going to be terrific. You're not always going to feel great. You're not always going to make the right decision. That's just the way it is. And I think we all know that. I think we all understand that. But we also do a really good job of forgetting it. But I think if you can remind yourself to be honest with yourself every day when you start a run, every time you take a starting line for a race, and say to yourself, you know what? I'm going to try my best. And my best may not be what I want it to be today, but it might even be better than what I'm expecting, that what I'm hoping for. What I do may supersede that, but I also may come up short. I'm ready for that. I'm ready for that challenge, because that's really what it is. And it doesn't have to be this intense before you go for an easy run. But it's important to know that sometimes easy runs suck. Sometimes you feel terrible on an easy run, no matter how easy you run it. Sometimes you just don't feel great. You feel sluggish the entire time. And the last 2 weeks have been great. The training's been fantastic. You're like, you know what? It's just breakthrough after breakthrough after breakthrough, breakdown. And the confusion sets in, and you start questioning yourself. You start wondering what you did wrong, when really all it was just a bad run. It was a bad run. Now, you can start to look back on it and figure things out, and we're going to get to that. I'm jumping ahead of myself, but let's just stay with this first topic for a second. Honesty. Honesty is one of the pillars of great training, great coaching, being a great teammate. You've got to be honest. And the honest truth about this sport is it's not always easy. It's not always new personal best. It's not always your fastest. It's not always your furthest. It's not always your easiest. Sometimes it's a struggle, even when it's supposed to be easy. Sometimes you're in the best shape of your life and you don't race like it. That's just how it works. So I think it's really important to be honest. Now, before I dive deep into how you can process a bad run or a bad race, before I get into some of the things I think you should do after a bad run or a bad race, let me also just sneak this little thing in here now. Sometimes it just happens, and there's no reason I can find. As a coaching perspective, sometimes it doesn't make sense. Yes, the day is perfect. You got a good sleep. You feel really good. You didn't eat right before the run. You're hydrated. You're in a good space emotionally and mindfully, and the run sucks or the race doesn't go well. Sometimes just, it's just that day. And there's nothing peculiar about the day. There's nothing extraordinary, or I should say, out of the ordinary about the day, other than the fact that you had a clunker. The race didn't go well, the run didn't go well. Sometimes it happens. Just like sometimes when you go for a run, everything clicks, and it's perfect, or as close to perfect as it can seemingly be, and the hills feel like you're dancing up them, the downhills feel loose and fluid, you're gracefully navigating the routes on the trails, or you're just flying along the roads where it feels like you're running on the softest surface imaginable, your form is fluid, everything is just going great. And what was different than yesterday, other than a flip of the calendar? Nothing. Not really, right? I mean, it's not like one night of sleep is going to change the world. It's not like an extra glass of water is going to change everything. They can all help. But what made this one day just so effortless? Or I should say, what made this effort seem so effortless? Well, I don't know. It just was a Wednesday, I guess, or a Saturday. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe it was the time of the day? Does that make any sense? Nope. So I just want to sneak in there that sometimes, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know why you ran as poorly as you did. I don't know why you felt so crappy. I don't know why it went so great. I mean, way better than I thought it was going to go. Where did this come from? I don't know why you felt so good on that long run. I mean, other than you're fit, but you're saying this was like an extraordinary feeling. Okay. Sometimes there are just outliers for no apparent reason. I mean, we can try to look for them, but I don't know if we're going to find something that like pins, the tail on the old donkey to say, this is why I had the best feeling run of my life. That felt totally different than the run yesterday and will feel totally different than the run tomorrow. Now you can say, well, it was fitness. Well, that doesn't make sense, because that would mean that the runs after this should feel comparatively close, right? I mean, comparatively speaking, they should feel just as good. It's not like you lost fitness in 24 hours or 48 hours. Did you? No. But we have these runs where we go, oh, everything clicked. And just sometimes everything click. And then we have other runs and races where nothing fits. And guess what? Sometimes that's the case. I just wanted to sneak that in there because I'm going to start looking at why things went wrong, why races didn't go as planned now. But before I even do that, I've got one more thing I want to just say, which is also important. So we have these other things that I think prior to us navigating how to deal with a bad run or a bad race. It's important to know to be honest. It's important to know that sometimes it happens. And it's also important to realize it's okay to not be okay. And by that, what I mean is it's okay to be upset about a bad run or a bad race. It's okay to be devastated after a race. It's okay to have your heart broken after a bad race. I'm okay with all of that. Because if I'm going to ask you from a coaching perspective, if you're going to ask yourself from an athlete perspective to care about this, to be passionate about this, to set goals and challenge yourself and invest in yourself in the hopes of reaching this goal, and it doesn't work out, and then I'm going to turn around and tell you, get over it just immediately, get over it, don't worry about it, why are you upset? That makes no sense. That makes no sense. I'm a complete hypocrite. I want you to care. I want you to invest. I want you to sacrifice. I want you to be committed. And then, if it doesn't work out, I want you to not be upset. But if it does work out, I want you to celebrate and be excited and be proud of yourself and be joyful. Well, if it doesn't work out, the pendulum has to swing the other way. So I am okay with you not being okay when things don't work out. Okay? What I do want you to know is that all it is proof that you cared about it, that it matters, that it mattered. Now, that shouldn't hold you back. And this is what's important. I'm okay with you not being okay about something not working out, but I don't want it to hold you back. It should not serve as an anchor. Because then what you're doing is you're taking something that you cared about, that you were passionate about, that you had invested yourself in, something that was a positive for you, something that moved you forward. And yes, maybe the goal wasn't achieved, but all that work, the entire journey to get to that starting line so you could attempt it on the other side of that line, all of that still happened. All of that is progression. All of that is movement forward. That's great. So if the end result, the final chapter doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, it does not negate the fact that you had done all of these things to get yourself there. That still means you're in a better place than you were when you started. It still means that you had goals that were met along the way to the ultimate goal. Now, if the final strides don't work out, it is foolish, it is self-sabotage to then take this entire journey and turn it into something that drags you back to where you were. You are still somewhere ahead, forward, down the road, in a better place. Yes, you can be devastated, you can be upset, but you're still down the road. Now, we can allow this to drag us backwards, to weigh us down, tear us apart, break us up. That's not what we're going to do. We can be upset that it didn't work out, but we are still going to be proud of the gains we made. We are still going to acknowledge the victories we had along the way. See, the way I look at it is this. It's like, and I'm going to use an example that I think kind of sort of makes sense. It's like if you started out on this journey to whatever you're trying to do, okay? It could be a 10K, or you want to be able to run a 5K without stopping, or you're taking on the marathon. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You can fit in whatever you want. It's a little bit like the stock market, though. At the beginning, you have like $1, okay, in this journey. And over the course of the next couple months, every single time you go for a run, you're getting some interest, and your money is growing. This investment into yourself. So on the starting line of the ultimate day, you now have $99.37, and you wanted $100, and you think if you nail this race, you're going to have $100. And guess what? The race doesn't go the way you wanted. Now, you had $99.37 at the starting line. If you allow this race to pull you backwards, drag you down, okay, take you in the wrong direction, like I say, break up what you've done, then there's a possibility that after this race, you have less than $99.37. Now, if you look at this as And you can be upset, by the way. Like I told you, it's okay to not be okay. You can be broken up, upset, and devastated by this race. But if you can acknowledge the fact that you went for it, you tried, and learned from it, then at a minimum, you have $99.37. And I would make the case that even if you didn't hit your goal, you're ending this run with more than $99.37, which means more than you started. And yes, you're still upset. Fine. You're still broken up by it. Okay. You shed some tears. Gotcha. I'm with you, and I'm okay with it. In fact, from a coaching point of view, I think it's awesome because it proves to me that you cared, that it mattered to you. I like to see that in an athlete. And we still have more than we started. We started with $1, and we got $99.72. Did we end with the $100? No. But we're closer to it. That's got to count for something. It counts for $89 plus. No. $98 plus. Man, I can't even do simple math right now. I'm too fired up. My point is, if you look at it that way, suddenly it makes some sense, doesn't it? Now you can get rid of some of this money by how you treat yourself. If you beat yourself up and if you let this drag out for weeks and weeks and weeks, and suddenly you're like, I can't take another starting line because I was so terrible. And as opposed to, okay, how should I handle this bad race? Because I know I've made gains. I know I've done some extraordinary things to get to here. How do I deal with this? Because this is not the way I thought it was going to end up. That's fine. Now let's talk about that. What happened? That's the first thing I usually ask an athlete after a bad race. That's usually the second thing I ask an athlete after they have what they believe is a bad race, or I believe is a bad race. Because I got to be honest. If I know you well enough, I probably know what you should run in a race or on a run. So if you come back to me and I can tell you're disappointed, well, the first thing I'm going to ask is, how are you doing? Because I want to know, how are you feeling? Maybe there's something I missed. But after that, because that's a personal answer, and we can talk about that in a minute, but I'll ask, what happened? Because those two questions, how are you feeling and what happened, give the majority of the answers that I need to know. We'll start with how you feeling. This could be a run or a race. How are you feeling? You had a bad run, you had a bad race. Terrible, tired, I felt fine. I feel good. Okay, let's just break it down. I'm tired. Okay, why are you tired? Well, I had a bad night of sleep. I broke up with my boyfriend. I was stressed out about exams. I lost my job. Whatever. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why you would be tired. That's really good to know, right? Now, if you stop for a moment and you're honest with yourself, again, honesty, it helps solve so many issues that we give ourselves. Let me just say that one more time. That we give ourselves. Just being honest with ourselves can solve so many of these things. You have a bad run, you have a bad race, you're about to beat the crap out of yourself, and then you say, wait a minute. I was up all last night with my kid, or I was sitting in traffic for 3 hours and I was stressed the entire time before this because I was going to miss practice. Whatever, it doesn't matter. The point is, if you know why you're tired, suddenly I think we have an idea why maybe the run didn't go the way you wanted it to, why the race didn't go the way you wanted it to. Just being honest when you ask yourself, how do I feel? Before the race, before the run, after the race, after the run, that's going to solve a lot of the issues that we usually impose upon ourselves after a bad run, after a bad race. And I'll tell you what, a lot of times you can stop yourself from having a bad run or a bad race just by asking yourself, how do I feel before the run, during the run? Just those two moments. You'll make adjustments and you can make some fixes. Doesn't mean you're going to have a great run, but you'll have a less bad run. That's another way of saying a better run if you don't like the whole positivity thing. So have a less bad run. Still, it's a bad run. Could have been worse. If you had just not asked yourself that question and answered honestly, could have been worse. Now, after that, what happened? Because maybe you felt fine, or maybe you were tired. Okay, fine. What happened? What did you do during the run, during the race? Were there bad decisions? Were there no decisions? Were there only right decisions? Was there a mix? What happened? Did you get attached to someone that was running the wrong pace for you? Did you lose sight of where you were on the course, on the loop? Did you fall down? Did you slip? Was the trail messy? What happened out there? Did your watch die and you panicked and you got really stressed out and upset about it? What happened? These are really simple questions that we never ask ourselves. Or at least I should say, we don't ask ourselves nearly enough, because a lot of times I ask these two questions and we figure it out. So I'm giving you the questions. You can ask yourself. We can still talk about it, but I'll tell you what, you're the better person to talk to about you. So ask yourself, how am I feeling and what happened? And don't rush the conversation. Why would you do that? This is an important conversation to have. Because I'll tell you what, if you don't ask these questions and you didn't have a great run, you didn't have a great race, you're going to be wondering why the run didn't go well, the race didn't go well, for a lot longer than it would have taken to just have this conversation with yourself. And I'll tell you what, I've known a lot of people that have had some bad races that have stuck with them for far too long, when if they had just had this conversation after the race, they could have moved on. But they didn't want to have the conversation. Because, yeah, it demands honesty. And sometimes being honest can be uncomfortable. But you're a runner. One of the things you need to do to become a better runner is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So, this is another place where you can work on that by being honest with yourself after a bad run, after a bad race. When you ask yourself, what happened? How am I feeling? Be honest. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable in these conversations with yourself or your coach. And guess what? You'll become a better runner. Yet another way to get better at running while you're not running. Okay, now I got another reason for you. And I'm not going to apologize for the fact that I was a teacher. Too bad. That's basically what a coach is. A coach is just a teacher. And a teacher really in some ways is just a coach. So listen, learn from it. Bad runs and bad races. Learn from them. They're going to happen. It's inevitable. You're going to have a bad run. You're going to have a bad race. It's going to happen. I'm not saying you're not going to be shocked or surprised when it happens, because a lot of times there is no indicator that it's going to happen, that today's the day I'm going to have a bad race or today's the day I'm going to have a bad run. But if you can learn from these bad runs and these bad races, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to have something that seems like a setback does not become a step back. You will still move forward if you can learn from a bad run or a bad race. And sometimes it's something very simple like, well, guess what? Sometimes you just have a bad run or a bad race. That will keep you moving forward. It could be something more specific, like I had a bad race because I ran tactically really poorly. I went out too fast, I fell asleep in the middle, I didn't cover the move in the third quarter, and I didn't battle at the end. Okay, a whole bunch of mistakes. Now, you could also beat yourself up for making those mistakes, which I think is silly, because if you can acknowledge the mistakes, you can learn from the mistakes, and if you can learn from the mistakes, you're less likely to make them again. Doesn't mean you won't make them again, it just means you're less likely. You're aware. So when the next time you go for a race and you've learned, you realize, okay, I've made the mistake of going out too fast. I'm going to go out intelligently. I'm going to go out confidently, but I'm not going to go out of control. I'm going to pay attention, stay awake in the middle, because I know this is where I fall asleep. I'm going to make sure I cover the move in the third quarter, and I'm going to try my best at the end. So even if the race doesn't go as great as I want it to, at least I know strategy-wise, I pretty much nailed it. But I think maybe this was the problem. Fine, let's go there and learn from it. So again, if you can learn from a bad run, if you can learn from a bad race, a setback will not become a step back. Super important to remember. And again, this goes right into your runs. It's the same thing. I had a bad run. Well, I did run in the middle of the day when it was really hot, and I could have run in the morning or I could have run after sunset. I didn't, and I had a tough run because I ran in the middle of the day. Not smart. Or I wasn't hydrating all day long. Not smart. Or I didn't eat the way I should have eaten. I didn't fuel myself properly, and as a result, I didn't have the strength that I needed to have a good run. Okay. Or I took the trail that was going to be icy, and as a result, I was slipping and sliding, and now my hamstrings are a little screwed up, my hip flexors are a little screwed up, and the run felt terrible because my form was never good, and I really should have just stayed on a treadmill today. Okay. You learned from it. This setback is now no longer a step back. This is what you need to do. You need to take some time and learn from it. And if you want to give yourself a little breathing space and say, I can't think about it right now. It's too raw. It's too real. I'm still a little sore about it mentally, emotionally. That's okay too. That's fine. You can give yourself some time. But don't give yourself too much time. Because you want to be able to remember the run and the race. You want to be able to go through it where you can remember the different parts of it, where you can still have that feeling, whether it's the butterflies or the stress or the fear or the joy, the euphoria, whatever it is. You know, the legs being heavy, the breathing being tight, all the different things that we can feel emotionally and physically. You still want that. So when you process it, when you think about it, it's fresh enough because, again, you want to be honest. And if you give a little bit too much time to it, sometimes you start to change what actually happened. Things get a little fuzzy. So I always like people within 24 hours, 48 hours, to go through the race. If it's a run, I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal. I think you're going to be able to kind of process it sooner. Although I will say this, I found a lot of people put a ton of pressure on their long runs and their speed runs, and that can cause panic in them too when things don't go really well. But again, all of these things, let's go back to the beginning. Being honest, understanding that sometimes just this stuff happens, and realizing if I ask how I felt, and what happened, I'm going to get to a place where I can learn from this. So have those foundational items here for your runs. Your good runs too. Let me just slide that in here too. You should be doing this for your good runs and your good races as well. It's not just the bad ones, but for today we're just talking about how to get over them. And this is the process you should go through, which just happens to be strikingly similar to the process of learning from and building off of good runs. This is a really fun process to go through on the great runs, the great races. So you can kind of double down on both instances. Okay, so before I go through some like rapid fire things, I'm just going to kind of really just repeat what I said for you. I mean, at first, I started with honesty, which I think is really important in running, in coaching, in being an athlete, in being a teammate, and in dealing with bad runs and bad races. You got to be honest. You have to understand that sometimes it happens. It does. You have to be okay with not being okay. I know I'm okay with you not being okay when you're not okay. I'm not okay with you saying you're okay when you're not okay. That, in fact, is not okay. But if you're not okay, I'm okay with you not being okay if you're not okay. Because what did I start with? Be honest. Then ask yourself the questions. How do I feel? How did I feel? And then what happened? And that honesty will allow you to learn from the bad runs and the bad races. And it was only like a minute and a half ago when I told you, if you can do that, then any setback won't become a step back. It'll be a step forward. It will be progression. So now, let's do a couple rapid fire things here. I think the term no regrets is really, really stupid. I just do. I think it's really dumb. I think it doesn't even look cool on a poster. I think it's just one of those things that gets said because somebody somewhere thought it sounded cool, and it's actually not cool at all. I mean, regret means to feel sorrow or remorse for something you did, for an act, okay? That's the verb, okay? Or to think with a sense of loss. That's the second one. Now, I'm okay with regretting things that I've done because I do regret things I've done. And if we're going to just focus this on running, but you could talk about other areas because this is about running and this is not about running. But with running, yeah, there are a lot of things I regret. I regret moves I made in races. I regret training decisions I made. I regret not committing to something that I really cared about the way that I should have committed. Did I learn from them? Yes. Am I better off for these bad decisions I made? Yes. Most of them, yeah, because I learned from them. Now, that being said, I don't think I needed to make them all. I don't think you need to make a mistake to learn from a mistake. We have 8 billion people on this planet. We've been around for a really long time. Most of the mistakes that anyone can make have been made before. We don't need to make them ourselves to learn from them. I can't disagree with that idea enough. Some people say, you got to make the mistake to learn from it. No, you don't. That's not true at all. If I see somebody do something completely stupid, I don't need to do it myself to realize it's completely stupid. I think that's just stupid. What I'm telling you here is it's okay to have regrets. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to carry with you some of these things. There was a race I did in high school that we, as a team, we really, really, really had looked forward to. For me personally, it was the race in high school I looked forward to more than anything else. And I had put it, basically out there on the calendar, maybe when I was a freshman, I said, I'm a senior, I'm going to do this. And I got there and I made a huge tactical blunder in the race. It still bothers me. I still regret making the move. Absolutely. I used it to help other athletes later on when I was coaching. I used myself as an example of what not to do. And guess what? They didn't make the mistake I made. They ran better. They did not need to make the tactical blunder to learn from it. I made the tactical blunder. So they didn't have to. So they didn't have to do it and learn from it. They learned from me making the mistake. I still regret that I did it, because if I hadn't made the mistake, I think we probably would have won. I think we probably would have, oh my gosh, why can't I say this? I think we probably would have run. That's really hard to say. I think we probably would have won the race. Wow. I think we probably would have won the race. You need to try that out. That's crazy. I think we probably would have won the race, because you want to say run the race, but that's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say I think we probably would have won the race. Oh man, that is really hard. Anyway, I'm just trying to sneak this here at this part of our conversation. It's okay to have regrets. It's okay to look back at a mistake and say, I wish I hadn't made that. That's fine. What is more important than having regrets is allowing the regrets to weigh you down. That's what I'm trying to get at. I still regret making that tactical blunder. I moved on from it. I said, okay, there are other things I want to accomplish, and I'm not going to allow this mistake to hold me back. In fact, for this to be worthwhile, I have to learn from it. And I have to take it into other races. And I did. And I even brought it into coaching. So I want you also, when you're having a bad run, when you're having a bad race, it's okay to regret it. And it's okay to be upset about it. But like I said, don't let it keep you where you are, or even worse, pull you back. Say, okay, I'm going to take the time to learn from this, and I'm going to bring it with me. And maybe you can share that mistake, that error, that setback with other people so they don't need to experience it themselves. What a great gift. That's earned wisdom there. I'll tell you what, that is earned wisdom. Share it. Okay, another thing I just want to drop here is the better you get when it comes to running, and really anything, the better you get, the harder it gets to get better. Let me just repeat that. The better you get, the harder it gets to get better. And running is just like anything else. You have these periods of just really rapid growth, but at some point, it starts to slow down. It doesn't mean that it stops, but it slows down. So you don't have these massive fitness jumps. We can think that's the trajectory, though, that when we start either from scratch or when we start over, early on we have these big fitness jumps. And we can convince ourselves like, oh, this is just going to keep happening. No. And a lot of times bad runs and bad races happen during that period where we think, oh, I'm due for another big jump. And it's like, no, you're due for a little jump or even a stride or a step. But that's it. And now it's going to be scratching and clawing and eking out little gains. It's not going to be these massive leaps forward. And if the expectation is the massive leap forward, even when we have a gain, if it's not the massive leap forward, we can think it's not movement forward. We can think it's a step back. We can think it is actually a bad run or a bad race, when in fact it's not. It's just our expectations are all out of whack. So I just want you to kind of have that phrase in the back of your mind that the better you get, the harder it gets to get better. All right, I got two more things I just want to talk to you before we get to the Mindful Minute with Coach Tammie. One is a phrase that I know you've heard me say before, which is embrace your weaknesses. Okay? Super important, especially as we're talking about bad runs or bad races. And the reason why is that often those bad runs or bad races could have something to do with weaknesses that we have that maybe we're not that comfortable looking at, acknowledging, spotlighting, or working on. And yet, if we can embrace our weaknesses, then it's really opportunities to have better runs and better races. It's opportunities for us to get stronger because you can strengthen your weaknesses. In fact, I believe your weaknesses are the easiest things to strengthen because they're so weak. It takes less to improve something that's not very good. Like, for instance, I always use foul shots as an example, and I always think back when, to some of the best foul shooters of all time. You got people like Steve Nash, who's, a 92% free throw shooter, something like that. It's really hard for him to go from 92% to 93%. It's really difficult. He only misses 8 out of 100 shots. Now, Shaquille O'Neal was like a 40% free throw shooter. He misses 60 out of 100. So if he really works hard on it, I would like to believe he has the potential to maybe become a 45% free throw shooter, maybe a 48% free throw shooter. That's a significant increase compared to Steve Nash moving up 1%. But what it takes is the acknowledgement of a weakness. So if you're having a bad race, and let's say it's something that's happening consistently, like you're running out of gas at the end of a run. Well, maybe it has to do with your endurance, or maybe it has to do with how you're doing your race, where you're a little bit too aggressive early, and you have to make sure that you are in control early, or you're going to need to build more endurance before you race because that's your weakness. Great! What an awesome opportunity. If your runs are consistently finding you feeling very weak at the end of it, maybe it's because you live in an area that can get very warm or very humid later in the day, and that's when you run because you're just not a morning person. The schedule allows for it, but you don't allow for it because you say things like, I'm not a morning person, I don't want to run in the morning. Well, maybe your weakness is that, and you've got to strike there. And you got to say, you know what, we're going to start by maybe once a week running in the morning when it's 25, 35, or 40 degrees cooler. And what you might find is you actually don't have a morning weakness at all. Maybe it's just something that you have been uncomfortable to go after because you've taught yourself through your own personal history that you don't run in the morning. So it must be because you're not a morning person. Who knows? The point is, if you can embrace your weaknesses and say, hey, these are opportunities to get better, as opposed to things that you need to hide, cover up, or ignore, or pretend that aren't there. That doesn't do anything for you. It doesn't help you. But embracing your weaknesses and working on them can. So if you're having bad runs, if you're having bad races, look for weaknesses. Embrace them. And then work on them. And then lastly, measure success as many ways as you can, which means you can have a bad run and you can have a bad race and you can still experience success in some ways. Maybe the time was nowhere near what you wanted to, but you're really proud of the way that you handled yourself, the self-talk that you gave yourself, the fact that the effort was still strong, the effort was still powerful. Measure success as many ways as you can. Maybe the run didn't go as well as you would have liked, but you know what you did? You went and you ran hills, and normally you don't like hills because you think they're a weakness. So sure, you struggled on the run. It was harder than you probably thought it should be, but you put yourself in a position to do something that you're not always comfortable doing. So guess what? That's a success. So measure success as many ways as you can. That doesn't mean you ignore the losses. What it means is you don't ignore the wins. Okay, this is an important episode. I'm glad that we did it, and I'm excited that you listened to it. Thank you for asking me to do this. And now, all right, let's bring in Coach Tammie of the Show Up Society to get our Mindset Minute. That's right, we're back. You've been reaching out and telling me, get the Mindset Minute back in the show. All right, calm down. Here it is. Coach Tammie's going to spend 60 seconds giving you some guidance, giving you an exercise on something you can do with your mindset today, right now. So, without any further ado, here is Coach Tammie.
Okay, my mindset tip for you is that just because you had a result that you don't love doesn't mean that anything is wrong with you. As a person or as a runner, you are still an amazing, badass runner. You still have all of the fitness and all of the things that you've learned. It just didn't come to fruition on that particular day at that particular time. Take the fact that you are still a good person and a good runner, and you have all of that fitness and experience in you, and let's see if it will happen next time. Think of yourself as a scientist. You're doing experiments. You're saying, okay, let's see if I train this way, and if I rest this way, and if I have nutrition this way, and if I recover this way, let's see if it turns out in a great race. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But a scientist doesn't tell themselves they're a bad scientist when the experiment doesn't work out the way they want. They just go, oh, okay, now I have more data. I'm going to learn what to do from here, and they try again. Do the same thing with your racing.
I love it. And you know what? It's a coaching mentality. Really, it's a coaching mentality. Because that's what you're looking at when you're looking at training. You're looking at experimentation. You're looking at finding ways to improve. And they're not set in stone. Because the athlete isn't set in stone and life isn't set in stone. So I love that mentality. Thank you for that Mindset Minute, Coach Tammie. And you can check out Coach Tammie at the Show Up Society, and I have the link in the show notes. And also, I should mention here that coming up in February 2024, just a few weeks from now, is the Best Runner Ever Winter Edition program. It's a 4-week program that Coach Tammie and I are putting on. We put on a Best Runner Ever, I think it was 2 summers ago, and we've been asked repeatedly, when are we doing another one? Well, we're doing another one in February, and you can check out all the details if you go to the show notes, and the details are there for what we're going to be doing over these 4 weeks. It's going to be an amazing community, and all the details on how you can register, because we want you to register and be a part of this awesome community, the Best Runner Ever community that's going to be rocking and rolling in February. Okay, it is time for the mailbag. Okay, this comes from Michael Cooper. Hello, Coach. I've just signed up for the 8-week 5K plan. I'm not a new runner, but it's been a while. I'm doing Red January, not taking uber serious because running is good for my mental health, but I'm not going to punish myself physically for it. There are 5 runs in week 1. What would you recommend for the other 2 days? More recovery runs? ? Okay, great question, Michael, because in the training plans that I put up, I'm assuming you're asking about the ones that I made for the Nike Run Club app. There are 5 recommended runs to do each week, with the caveat that I'm really recommending you do at least 3. I have 5 in there. Do at least 3 so you can get the diversity and the endurance and the speed work. But I have 5 in there because obviously some people like to run 4, some people like to run 5 days a week, and yes, some people like to run 6 or 7. If you're someone that runs on average 6 or 7 days a week, then those extra 2 days because those 5 days that I have recommended for you as it stands are a speed workout, a long run, and 3 recovery runs. So those additional 2 days, you can kind of decide what you want to do here. I would recommend at most one of them is an additional speed run, which means you could just add 2 more recovery runs. And I think you have to look at this as week to week. And if you look at the week that was and the week ahead, and you kind of focus on the week that you're in, you can decide this week, do I want to do 2 recovery runs because maybe I'm a little bit more fatigued than normal, or you're taking on non-running activities, work, school, home life, that's going to be taxing you. So you do want to run 2 extra days, but you don't want the extra stress, positive stress, but stress associated with a speed run. Or you look at your week and you say, you know what, I think I could do another speed run. Then you have to look at the speed run that I'm actually recommending that week. Because then what you can do is you can say, okay, well, how can I play off this? Because if it's, let's say, shorter, faster intervals, okay, so high intensity intervals, you may say, okay, for the second speed run, let's do something different. Not high intensity, lower intensity, but maybe a higher volume. So you could do something like a tempo run, or you could do something like a light fartlek, something like that. The opposite could be the case, where maybe the recommended speed run is a tempo run. And you could look at your week and say, okay, well, I could do another tempo run. I could do a fartlek. I could do some hills. Maybe I want to do some intervals, longer intervals, shorter intervals. There's always a piece that's going to fit best. It doesn't mean it fits perfectly, but it fits best because the training isn't perfect, okay? It's open to adjustment, to change. You need to look at it week-to-week basis and even daily. If you're adding 2 runs, maybe at the beginning of the week you're thinking it's going to be a speed run and a recovery run, and when you finally get to the day that's supposed to be the speed run, you say, I'm a little bit more fatigued than I thought, or the weather is not conducive to doing a speed workout. You have the ability to adjust. That's what coaching is. It's adjustments to the training plan. So I'm going to summarize this way. If you're doing the 5K plan and you're already running all 5 runs, which are 3 recovery runs, 1 speed run, 1 long run, you have the ability to add either 2 more recovery runs or a recovery run and a speed run. Just pay attention to how you're feeling, pay attention to the work you've done, and pay attention to the work you're about to do, because they all should play a part in what you're doing on that specific day. Okay? But great question, Michael, and thank you for sending it in. Appreciate it. That one actually came through DMs on Instagram. So next week, I think what we'll do is we're going to set aside a little bit more time because I have a backlog of some mailbag stuff and some letters that aren't even questions I want to tackle. So maybe next week I'll carve off maybe the second half even of the podcast, because I know everyone really loves the mailbag and I love diving into the mailbag. So thank you to everyone that is sending stuff in. We really appreciate it. And by we, I mean me. And thank you to everyone that's sending stuff to the mailbag. I really appreciate it. Okay, well, we're here. We're here at the end of 32. So thank you to everyone that listened. Thank you to everyone that subscribed and rated and reviewed Coach Bennett's podcast. Please keep it up. Share it with your friends. Share it with your teammates. Share it with your family. And let's keep building this community. So thank you for listening. Can't wait to talk to you again next week. And until then, take care of yourself. Take care of each other, and I'll meet you on that next starting line. Thank you so much for listening to Coach Bennett's podcast today. And if you're not already following or subscribed to the podcast on whatever platform you're listening, well, I really wish you would because it helps a lot. Also, check out the show notes because you'll find a link to Coach Bennett's newsletter, as well as all the social media sites that I'm on. Places like Threads and Facebook and Instagram and Mastodon and YouTube, and even the artist formerly known as Twitter. Whatever that dumpster fire is called today, you'll find a link to it because I'm on there. Thank you so much again for listening, and until next time, take care of yourself.